Howdy everybody. I'm glad everybody was able to come back for my second part of this series of the Cold War. So, I would like to get in now to the topic of one of the more interesting reconnaissance vehicles of the early eras. I know a lot of you are thinking the M24 is something I would go on to, but I can still argue it's World War II, similar to the M26. If it does get enough views though and a few comments, I would absolutely love to go into the pre-Cold War stuff there that was eventually used in the Cold War. But we are designatedly talking about the Cold War era tanks. So, we'll be going over the M41A1 Walker's Bulldog. I know, a weird tank at the time, and I think is pretty similar to the Chaffee in most regards. And a lot of people actually enjoy the Bulldog, so I think it's going to be an interesting video to see pop up on your For You page. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the history, and then the gameplay. I know what a lot of you are thinking. Why am I doing a historical video on the Bulldog when I didn't even do it for the M46? Don't worry, the M46 will get its own video, but I really want to talk about the Bulldog real quick in its history. I will be mostly using Wikipedia, so most of this information could be easily found online. But I will be featuring this in the beginning part of the video because, you know, why not, right? Because I want to say that there is a conflict where it is serving in right now. If you scroll over the Wikipedia, it is in the 2025 Cambodian-Thailand conflict. I don't know how this happened, but I guess it's just a remix of it. It was in service between 1953 and 1969 at the U.S. Armed Forces, while today it is still presently used after 1961 when it was first handed out to its other friends of nations, allies. It was designed in 1944, but other than that, the Bulldog's a pretty normal vehicle. It was going off the aging fleet of the Chaffee, and it makes sense. The Chaffee was getting outdated by this point. The Bulldog program was kind of an emphasis to replace main battle tanks, such as the M47. Of course, it really didn't make much of a difference. It was more of a recon tank than ever going to replace anything like an MBT, and would eventually lead to the production of the M551 Sheridan, which will eventually be mentioned in Season 2, or Series Part 2, of the Cold War. Now, there's quite a few operators of this fun little tank, and I guess I'll go over some of the more urgent ones, I guess. The Taiwan, the Dominican Republic, Thailand, and Uruguay? What? Pretty much a short summary, the Bulldog has been used in quite a few nations. I mean, everybody's used the Bulldog, really. So that's kind of funny to think about, right? I mean, a tank that is pretty lackluster has been used everywhere. This is because of, I think, of how light and cheap it was. But I won't begin too much into that. A few other things I wanted to mention was its use in the Korean War. I would like to say that even though it was used in the Korean War, it would eventually get used in other wars like the Vietnam War and the Bay of Pigs invasion. That's a funny one. Vietnam War is where it really stood out, not because of anything in particular, but because of how light it was. It really helped out quite a bit, and because of how cheap it was to manufacture in other nations, you can only imagine why. Of course, this is pretty much all I've got to talk about, so let's actually move into actually some of the more important stuff. War Thunder. First off, we've got a 76.1 millimeter anti-tank gun. Now, this doesn't sound like quite a bit at its BR 6.3. It's not the most impressive thing in the world, but you do have a few shell options which I will say will help you beneficially. First off, M33-1A2, or I'm just going to call it M33 throughout the entire video here. M33 is pretty much a SABOT round, or more preferably called as the APDS, Armored Piercing Discarding Sabot Shell. Now, this has 296 millimeters of pen, which isn't awful, and comparably to the M46, it only has a few millimeters less. The problem with the Sabot rounds is the fact that they're very, 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 very awful shrapnel damage, because it's pretty much non-existent, as you would expect from having no filler, but it can't get worse, right? Well, unlike heat shells, these things bounce off things quite more frequently, which you may not think is a big deal, but it can tend to lead to those problems. But we also got to go over the other shells we got in this. So, we got to talk about the M339, the M33-1A2, the M352, the M361, and the M319. All these shells are pretty good, I won't lie. If you need a smoke round, you got the M361. If you need a pretty good HE round, the M352, which is your only HE round, is a pretty solid pick. I would preferably use the 50 cals, but that's just me. M319 is pretty much just a worse Sabot round, so I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't take it. Your stock shell, however, though, the M339, is pretty lackluster in penetration, But while that may be true, it does have the effect of just a normal AP round. So honestly, when you're picking it, it's just going to be a larger shell, is really all you're doing. So is it bad? No, but it's an armor-piercing ballistic cap shell. Not going to do the best thing in the world. Obviously, there's not much more I can really talk about with the shells. I would probably take about 20 to 25 out. I had the video clip I'm going to be showing you guys. I ran out of shells pretty quickly, so I would more suggest 25 if you're a player that's more commonly skilled. If you're someone newer, I would recommend 20. Now, first off, you're playing a recon vehicle. What does this mean? First off, you get one of the best features you'll ever have on any vehicle, recon abilities. So by hitting B, which is the standard keybind for binoculars, from binoculars in our case, pretty much give you visuals throughout your binocular scope, which, unlike your main scope, can get you a visual above the battlefield. Now, I just hit the V button, giving me the recon capability. What the recon button basically does is if you're hovering above a vehicle that is obviously an enemy vehicle, it will point them out on the mini-map and on the main map. And you can even see them in the game. So, this is helpful for a few reasons, and this will help you out too as well. First off, it can give your team ideas of where the enemies are at. Unlike generic pings, where it's just like, this is a designated grit zone, it will give you an exact location of that player. And if they're a light vehicle, it can be especially helpful to see where they're moving around to. Another very helpful thing with recon is the fact that it can give you an assist. This is beneficial to you. Recon is super crucial, especially for the Bulldog, I feel like. Especially the American one with only SABOT rounds, it becomes pretty proficient. Getting assist is very helpful, and it will get you a lot of XP. Another thing I gotta mention is the mobility of the Bulldog. The Bulldog moves pretty quick. At its BR range, as you would probably think, its mobility is pretty keen. But compared to the rest of the vehicles you're playing with, it is definitely not your fastest, but it is the one that gets your recon in a 50 cal. Unlike the rest of the vehicles you will unlock other than the M46, which does not have the recon ability and is a medium tank, the Bulldog is kind of a mix between the M56 and the M46, but with no heat rounds. If you did want to play something with heat rounds, I would highly recommend going to the German version. The German version does carry a heat FS, which is pretty good, but nothing over the top. Now, I want to make a pretty clear standpoint here. Playing light vehicles does not automatically mean that you have to play recon. I would recommend it, yes, but that doesn't exactly make it a fair statement. The Bulldog as a rating I don't think is awful. I think the Bulldog's mobility and its gun aren't bad in any sense. The mobility especially is very good. But beyond that, isn't much better than what you would expect it to be. Yes, the Bulldog is very fast, but also has no armor. Obviously, recon tank shouldn't. But unlike some where it has no armor, is the best armor, you have absolutely zero armor, but no spacing. Therefore, shells to go through your boot are not going to destroy you. And due to this being the BR where APHE is still existent, you could probably just get easily hit and explode. What is the best way to play the Bulldog? I don't have many recommendations on it, but it is a pretty common vehicle to be liked upon. So I guess here's what I would recommend. I would not play it like most recon vehicles. You are quick, but that doesn't make you the fastest thing out there. Yes, you can knock out enemy vehicles, but only if you know what you're doing. So what I would recommend, especially with stock rounds, is going around doing recon abilities and capping points that are obviously no one's going to. You can typically knock out some pretty hefty targets, but this doesn't make it entirely impossible to run into something you can't counter. So I would recommend running around with it and not using it as a sit-still tank. Like most recon vehicles, you're pretty quick, and your mobility once you get max engine, transmission, and all those fancy parts, you can be pretty quick. So, as a final recommendation for the Bulldog, I would probably recommend just moving around with it. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's not very much of a recommendation. Most recon vehicles do that anyways. But the Bulldog, I can argue differently. While yes, you can move around, this doesn't make the Bulldog inabsent from actually being a sniper. A ranged unit with a 76 with SABOT isn't awful, actually. So would I recommend sniping? Yes and no. I don't think it's the best way to get good XP, but I do think it's a very helpful thing if you want to be. And especially if you want to play recon. If you want to sit back and play recon, I would recommend it. It's a good way to get assists, and for the most part can even get you some kills. It won't get you caps, but it can do some pretty good work. When I typically play recon tanks, I typically rush to the cap point as fast as humanly possible, then pretty much book it out and wait for the rest of my team to show up. So that was pretty much my entire talk about the Bulldog. I know it was a lot longer than the M46 video, and I'll try to keep it shorter from here on out, but I think I had a lot of things to go over because this is your first reconnaissance vehicle you'll be truly playing beyond the Chaffee. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will be releasing the M56 and M50 video probably either tonight or day after. Of course, I hope you guys would like to keep watching this. Please leave comments down below if you guys want to continue seeing more content like this, or if we want to go back to gameplay. I'll probably wrap up with the M56 and the M50, and then I'll probably try to get some more popularity before I restart this. But we'll see how it goes. We may like this more in gameplay, we may not. Due to the videos being pretty long, I can only presume why. But I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys in the next video.